Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister, how are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. How are you, sister?
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for joining us today on the Niqabi Diaries. It's a real pleasure to have you. For those of you who don't know, we have with us today Sister Ustadha Fatima Barkatullah. And could you please, I'll let you to introduce yourself further. Tell us about what you do for some of the viewers who may not know who you are.
What do I do? Well, I think most people have maybe come across me through the Ilmfeed Podcast. So I'm one of the presenters of the Ilmfeed Podcast. I've graduated from 2 Alamiya degrees, Islamic Sharia degrees, and I'm currently doing an MA in Islamic law. And I used to be the head of Seeds of Change, which is a Muslim women's conference that was run by IERA, Islamic Education and Research Academy, the Dawah organization, which was the largest Muslim women's conference in Europe. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So, sister, mashallah, I first came across you, I think personally, I've seen you like on the news and things like a couple of times when it came to, in this country, they was talking about the niqab ban and should be banned and why do Muslim women wear the niqab. And I remember there was a show, and I think that was the first time that I actually saw you on there. And they did say that you was like, a female scholar or something like that, but they never, like, in the interview, for me personally, I didn't feel satisfied that they'd given you enough time to actually really kind of address the questions that were asked. I know they do edit things as well. So for me, maybe they'd cut things down quite a lot, and I find that often this happens. So this is one of the reasons why I've started such a podcast, in order to let sisters who do wear the niqab actually share their stories without being censored or edited against, like, their will, basically, and letting them to express themselves. So inshallah, I'll ask you some questions about your experience with the niqab. How long have you been wearing it?
Okay, well, I think before we go into that, I should sort of explain that I probably the first time I wore niqab was probably I first tried it as a teenager in Egypt, but I started wearing it on and off from my wedding day, actually, because my wedding day was one of the first days that I really properly wore makeup.
Okay.
Because I was quite young when I got married. I was 19.
Alhamdulillah.
And it was I wasn't really brought up in a family where makeup was a big thing, I was brought up in a religious family, and on my wedding day, I had a lady who was doing my makeup, and it just made sense to me that if I'm going to wear makeup, if I'm going to beautify my face, especially, and I'm doing that for my husband, that should be covered, right, for any other than him. So, because otherwise, obviously I'll be exposing my beauty and accentuating it.
Yes.
So I wore the niqab when I was coming, and when I left my house, basically, for my wedding. And I would say ever since, I wouldn't say I'm like a full-time niqabi, right? Like, not somebody who wears it all the time, like when I go out. But especially definitely when I'm online, if I have to be on camera, if I have to work with men closely, because I was in some Muslim organizations and stuff, then I would wear niqab. But I don't wear it all the time, like on the streets and stuff.
Alhamdulillah. So, did you have any obstacles when you first decided to put it on? And you mentioned that your family were quite religious, so I'm assuming they wouldn't have had an issue with it. But was there did anybody kind of question you, like, why are you bothering to wear that? Because especially when it comes to weddings, often people, in some cultures can take that as an excuse that you can just, show your beauty as much as possible. Did you have any kind of?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe some of the guests might have been a bit surprised because they'd never seen me in niqab. But overall, I think people respected it. Sometimes over the years, like my parents, they might have said to me, especially my dad, he once said to me that, he kind of hinted, I would say, that I don't really have to wear niqab when I'm doing like stuff on TV and stuff, because he thought maybe he thought it would make me more approachable.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything more than just a hint, I would say. So from I would say the worst experience I've had while wearing niqab has been, I was at this Islamic event once, believe it or not. It's an Islamic event, a Muslim women's event organized by someone, and I was at a stall for representing the Muslim organization, and this lady came up to the stall, and she was like, I would say she was a Muslim, but she was not wearing hijab.
Okay.
She seemed quite westernized, like quite mashallah, modern looking, right, and like stylish. And she walked up to the stall and, like, out of the blue, for no reason, she just started pointing at me and my sisters, my friends, the sisters who were with me, and said, the reason why us Muslims are being held back in this country is because of people like you. Right? Because of people who are dressed like you.
SubhanAllah.
And I remember we were like trying to engage with her and say, well, actually it's probably due to mentality like the one that you're expressing, which is that we have to literally let go of our principles, our deen, our culture, everything, and conform to the Western, the colonizers' way of life in order to be accepted,
Yes.
So that was quite shocking, actually, because I think it was shocking because it was a Muslim.
Yeah.
Who said it, but it kind of shows you that. I mean, even like when I started doing the Ilmfeed podcast, it's quite funny. Like if you read the comments under any of the videos, there'll be those who'll come on, and by the way, these are usually brothers. There'll be brothers who'll say, "MashaAllah, this sister, she's dressed the way a Muslim should, right?
Yeah.
The ideal Muslim women's dress, right?" And then you'll have people straight afterwards saying things like, why do you have to dress like this? This is extreme. This is right. So, SubhanAllah, it's quite interesting that it's quite polarizing still, in that way.
Yes. Yes, definitely. So from the Islamic perspective, I have to ask you, obviously, because mashallah, you're the Ustadha, you've studied. What is your kind of views? Like, how do you think, as Muslims, the niqab? How do you think, as Muslims, the niqab is kind of like? How do you think we can wear the niqab and integrate into this society? What's your kind of views on that? I know obviously we do integrate into the society, but when you're approached by, for example, because obviously you do a lot of media and these kinds of things, and even with like British media and stuff like that, non-Muslim media, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I think with regards to the niqab, I think there are strong arguments within Islam, within the Islamic schools of thought, for it being obligatory, but also for it being, mustahab, which is like recommended and a good, an extra good deed, but not obligatory, right? And I think I must say, when you read the literature on either side, you get quite convinced,
Yeah.
So I think the arguments are very strong on both sides. But I kind of have leaned towards the opinion that it's mustahab, right? So I actually encourage sisters to wear it as much as they can. So I remember once I had an argument with a sister, she's my friend, so, just like a passionate discussion. When I said, when she realized that, some of us, we wear niqab sometimes, like when we're if we're giving a speech in front of a mixed audience and stuff like that, or if we have to, like, work with men, etc. And I remember her thinking of it as very black and white, that either you wear it or you don't, right?
Yeah.
And I said to her, well, do you consider it to be obligatory? And she said no. So I said, okay, so then that means it's like a good deed, right? So it's like sadaqah.
Yeah.
If you give, the more you give, the more reward you get, right? So similarly, I think one way to look at the niqab is the more modest we are, the more we cover, and the more kind of we can preserve ourselves, then inshallah we'll get reward for that. So I think I like to encourage sisters, especially when they're in situations where they're wearing makeup, to definitely wear niqab, because I think it's not right to kind of accentuate your. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because it's become quite common now. Makeup with hijab has become very normal now, or I wouldn't say normal. I would say it's starting to be normalized. And I see younger sisters often, they will never go out without wearing quite heavy makeup, and that goes against the ayah of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ, tell them not to show their adornments, their beautification, right? So anytime we put zina on, whether it's, and I know there's different interpretations of the word zina, but one general or generic interpretation could be beautification. Anytime we beautify ourselves, especially when it's like noticeable makeup, then I think we as Muslim women have a duty to cover that, and to preserve ourselves. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that, don't tap your feet in such a way that people will know the jewelry that you're wearing, like the anklets and the jewelry that you're wearing underneath, and that's not even visible, right? Then what more for makeup and these types of beautifications, and even worse, like people turning the hijab itself into a sort of like a dress, right? Like I would say a beautification by putting jewels on it and sparkly things. And so I think in that sense, I think I would like to advocate for sisters that niqab should be a part of every Muslim woman's life, even if she's not wearing it permanently. I think every Muslim woman should have a niqab in her wardrobe, and it should be something that we wear at least on occasion, especially when we beautified ourselves.
Yeah, mashallah, I can definitely I think that sounds fair, because I know one of my close friends, that's what she does. She has niqab for that purpose, especially like if we're going to like a wedding or something, and she puts makeup just to like kind of cover up. But on
Yeah,
that
but
note, I'd like
yeah.
to ask, like, what about, for example, like sometimes when you do wear the niqab and you've got makeup on, especially like eye makeup, this is one of like the most on your face is the place you can probably put the most makeup, and like especially different colors and things like that. So, what would your view be on that? Because obviously it's still kind of, you've got a niqab on, but then you've beautified your eyes. So would it be more for sisters who, for example, if you wear lipstick, then you wear the niqab because it's covering the area that you've actually got like most makeup showing. And if a sister, for example, is just wearing like an eyeliner, like a simple kohol, it's not like so kind of prominent. Would that be okay, like with the niqab? Would it be considered as like a beautification?
Obviously, like I would say, we should do our best. Do your best. So, but we don't need to be overly obsessed about it. I think. I think when we get overly obsessed, then it goes into the territory of like, I have seen people have quite extreme ways of dealing with sisters, and I think we just do our best, except anything that is necessary. Obviously, you have to be able to see, So if you can see, if you need to be able to see, then that's fine. But don't. Maybe we can do things like put the eye makeup on when we arrive at a venue, for example, or even if we are going to go out and we have eye makeup and we have a niqab and obviously the eye is exposed, we just try to avoid kind of being seen by people, like if we can get into the car or whatever, But I don't think we don't need to be too overly obsessed with it, because I do think there's an extreme that sometimes happens, which is that, as a woman, it's almost like you have to completely be erased before your hijab is valid,
Yeah.
And I don't think it's like that. If you notice the verses in the Quran about hijab, they always end with, and Allah is forgiving, And I feel that one of the reasons for that is that we try our best, but we might fall short, and we don't need to like overly obsess about it, but we should do our best.
Yes, alhamdulillah. And on that note, I just wanted to add, like, there are some new niqabs now which they have like an extra like little flap, so it kind of makes it, you can adjust it so to help you cover your eyes like a little bit more and you still be able to see at the same time. So those might be like another option for sisters who, if you're listening and you do wear makeup to weddings and you like to wear the niqab, like maybe you could look into getting one of those, inshallah. That would also be helpful. So
and I think it also matters. I think it also matters like what if you're married, what your husband thinks as well.
Of course.
Because as Muslim women, I think this is one of the things that I didn't used to like about the kind of media discussions that we would have. That they would kind of coerce you almost into or expect and want you to say that it's completely your own decision as a Muslim woman, right? And I know that for most or many sisters it is, but as Muslimas, we choose to submit to Allah, right?
Yeah.
And Allah tells us to obey our husbands. So we choose to submit to Allah. So we submit to the considerations of our husband and what he would like as well, right? So I think if a husband, for example, feels very strongly about his wife covering her face, and obviously without coercion or like obviously without any kind of anything coercive, but with good manners, he would like her to wear niqab, then that's something that as Muslim women we're supposed to obey and we're supposed to respect, right? And we should not see that as a overprotection or something like this, we should see that as actually we should be flattered that our husband, you know, he has ghira for us. He has this sense of protectiveness over us, and he's within his right to have that, you know. Obviously, it should be something that a man would encourage his wife to do with hikmah, with wisdom.
Yes.
But I think that the reason why I'm mentioning that is that is also a consideration, isn't it, when we're talking about whether, if you're wearing eye makeup and stuff, and like if your husband feels very strongly about that, then yeah, you should try to find niqabs that would cover your eyes, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because I know some husbands don't even like the wife to wear makeup at all, like even at home. They just don't like makeup, full stop.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But I mean, so what you've mentioned so far about if a husband would like his wife to wear the niqab, then, you know, he should be wise and just advise her gently to try to convince her to wear it without, you know, forcing her. But on the flip side, if the husband doesn't want the wife to wear the niqab and she's somebody who was wearing the niqab before, then what would your advice be in that situation?
I think these are probably things that should be discussed before marriage, if possible.
Yes.
You know, especially if people feel strongly about them. But even after marriage, I mean, look, if there is, I think in any marriage, right, you can have different opinions about things, right? And it's not just niqab, it could be about anything. It could be about, I don't know, birthdays, or I don't know, like, I'm thinking of different things that sometimes people might have different views on, or the way you bring up your kids, or the rules in the house and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think any marriage is about negotiation. So it's about getting your argument forward, and, you know, your reasoning, and listening to your husband's reasoning, and then coming to some ground that you can both live with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the ideal, but I think if a husband has a legitimate concerns, you know, or reasons, then I think if a wife feels strongly that she would like to continue wearing the niqab, she should speak to him about it, and she should try to convince him. But if he isn't convinced, and, you know, I don't mean that he's telling her to wear makeup now in public or stuff like that, you know, but I mean he's just maybe concerned about her, I don't know, her safety, right? Or something like this, then I think overall the husband is the Amir of the house, right?
Yes.
He's the he's in charge. So I think she should do her best to, you know, to comply with that.
Inshallah. Inshallah. So would you say that the niqab is a barrier, and if so, which sense?
A barrier. Well, do you know what? Unfortunately, I think the hijab is a barrier. Hijab can be a barrier as well. It's not really it's not really those items themselves. It's the way people perceive them, right?
Yes.
So, for example, when you're in an area like East London, I've noticed, you know, like, nobody will bat an eyelid. It's like so normal for people to interact with hijabis and niqabis, and, you know, it's like literally it feels like there's no barrier. Whether you're talking to a non-Muslim or Muslim, you know, people just take you as you are. It's just from what I've experienced anyway. You go to certain areas which are maybe a little bit more less, I would say, diverse, and definitely you get stared at. People see it as a barrier. They see it as they wonder if you can speak English, you know, and stuff like that as well. So I think in that sense, yeah, people do in the West, in Britain anyway. I don't know what it's like in America, but in Britain and in many European countries, it is seen as a barrier. But I think that's more about what is in the mind of the people who perceive it as a barrier, you know, rather than it being an actual real barrier. So I think there is a cultural aspect to that, you know. I remember when I lived in Egypt, there was this cultural idea that black was not a good color to wear, you know. So if you wore black, they would be like, "Oh, look, you're such a young girl. Why are you wearing black?" You know.
Yeah.
They associated it with death, I guess, and like funerals, right?
Well, they do wear black to funerals in Egypt, don't they?
Yeah. And I think in the West as well, black is associated with funerals and sadness, and although little black dresses aren't, I guess. But still, you know, there's this idea of blackness, and I think when you read books and you read about, you know, the imagery of like negative imagery, it tends to be like that, you know, especially in Western literature. So I do think there is a cultural perception, and in certain areas it's not so felt, and in other areas it is. But I think as a Muslim, in various situations, you end up feeling like a stranger anyway. You're going to hold on to your principles. Actually, just the other day, I wasn't wearing niqab. I was at a ladies only working space. You know, it's like a, you know, these what are they called, co-working spaces.
Okay.
Where you basically have a table. You come in. You have membership, and you have a table, which you can use for working away from home. And a lady came, one of the owners, and she wanted to speak to me about it, and about something, and she was very nice to me and everything, but I don't know why she wanted to speak to me. She started the conversation, and I think it's because she saw that I was online and I was like active online, and that my content was religion related, and she just sat with me and said, "Look, I just wanted to explore something with you. You know, we would like to keep this working space a secular space, right?" And I was like, "Okay." You know, like, okay. And she said, "You feel really great that you feel comfortable here, right? And you know, because we want to encourage diversity, and she said, you know, but I just want you to be aware that we do have women here who are basically, you know, from the LGBT community. We have women here from Jewish, Christian, all sorts of backgrounds, and atheists, and I all this time I'm sitting there thinking, and what does this have to do with me? You know, like, why are you like, it was a place full of white blonde women, right? I would say, and I was probably one of the only ethnic minorities, right? And she had come over to me saying that they want to like celebrate diversity whilst making me feel really uncomfortable about being different, right? And you know, towards the end of the conversation, I said to her, you know, I still really don't know what exactly you are trying to say. Okay. But are you uncomfortable with the way I'm dressed? I literally asked her point blank, you know. And she went quiet, you know. She was very sort of sheepish at this point, because I guess she probably felt really shallow, you know. But I think she kind of realized that, that's the only thing that differentiates me from the other people there, right? Literally the way I'm dressed. Because I said to her, look, are you saying that I can't work on Islamic work, because you don't know what the people here are working on. They could be working on the church project, a synagogue project, and whatever, like. So anyway, afterwards I sent her an email, and I actually said to her that thank you. She thanked me, and she said, I hope you didn't mind us having that conversation. We're just trying to feel our way around these issues. And anyway, I actually sent her an email to say, actually, I just want you to think about this, because I think the only thing that you were objecting to was the way I'm dressed.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's some internalized, unconscious Islamophobia there, right? I sent her an email, right? And I tried to do it in the nicest possible way, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, she replied really apologetic. And she said, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think you might be right. And she said, yes, she said one of the co-founder, the co-founder of that space, that workspace, had grown up in a Muslim family, okay?
Right.
Like had one parent who was Muslim, and had some very negative experiences with the Muslim community, right? In her country. And all this time I'm thinking, what's this got to do with me, right? But still, she said, but you're right, maybe there is some unconscious stuff there, that we're like, and it's for us to deal with. And she said, please, would you have another cup of tea with me one day, whatever. But I thought to myself, I tried to be as kind as possible, but at the same time, I wasn't going to take it,
Yeah, of course.
Because, and I think that's the kind of thing maybe we need to do more of. Calling this stuff out, like literally somebody making you feel uncomfortable. And it didn't matter if I wasn't wearing niqab, I was wearing a hijab and jilbab. So I think it's a bit of a red herring, thinking that niqab is the thing that makes people freak out. It's actually just just being different, and just the narrative surrounding what it is to be a Muslim, and and people thinking of the hijab as a anti-feminist kind of symbol, right? Or as a symbol of male subjugation, and right? So I think we have to help people in the community, in our communities in the Western world, to understand us. And I know that people think, oh, why should I have to do that, right? I know I've heard sisters say, why should I have to do that? It's your responsibility to find out about me. Fine, that's one approach, but that's not really going to help us. I think if you just wait for everyone to reach out to us. I think sometimes we need to be the ones who, especially as people who think about being da'is, as people who want to invite people to Islam, want to invite people at the end of the day to Allah. We do have to be the ones who reach out. We do have to be the ones who break the ice, who in very kind but firm terms do not accept Islamophobia, and don't accept people, singling us out for nothing but the fact that we worship Allah and that we dress in a certain way, right? So yeah, I think one way to break that barrier is to literally be the one who breaks the ice, be the one who actually maybe is a bit more, goes beyond the norm, beyond the call of duty, in terms of being friendly and reaching out to people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's showing that human connection as well, just reminding people that, yes, we're human beings too.
But sometimes I do think, like, would I, if I was going up to some village up north in London, in the UK, right? Would I wear the niqab? And I must admit that I would not. If it was like a rural area where there's people who literally don't even see a brown face, hardly. And I'm walking in there with niqab. I think because I don't consider it to be obligatory, I don't believe that the deen asks us to kind of, what's the word? To bring unnecessary fitna to a situation. You know, I don't know if fitna is the right word, but what I mean is that, you know, in any situation you have to weigh up the benefits and the harms.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think in places where people have hardly ever seen a Muslim, they've never seen even diversity of any kind, I think we must, of course, obey Allah, and we must keep to our principles, to whatever amount we believe is obligatory, you know. But there to do like extra things that we think are not obligatory, but they are, you know, maybe mustahab in normal situations. In those situations, it might not be, simply because, you know, the harm that it could bring, in terms of the animosity, the kind of, it could be more than the good, you know. So I think it's worth weighing up situations, you know. And I don't think there's like a blanket thing you could say for the whole of any area of the world, you know. Like, but on the other hand, if you were going to somewhere like Saudi Arabia, or a country where niqab is the norm, right? I don't know if niqab is the norm anymore in Saudi Arabia, actually. I haven't been for some time, and I don't think Makkah is always a good representation of the rest of the country. But say you were in an area where niqab is the norm. Now, for you to then not wear the niqab and go out would make you more conspicuous, right?
Will make you stick out. To be honest, I spoke with a sister recently, and she said that she wears the niqab for that reason, only so that she doesn't stick out. Because like if she lives in Medina, and she said she doesn't wear the niqab all the time, but when she's going to a gathering where she knows that all the sisters wear the niqab, she just wears it because she doesn't want to be the only one not wearing the niqab.
Yeah, and also because the men there would kind of, they relate to you differently, you know, if you don't wear niqab, because again, it's complicated, but there's cultural considerations. Like, as Muslims, we are supposed to take cultural considerations in, and that's probably one of the reasons why I kind of avoid wearing all black, because again, in the West, I feel, okay, and I'm not saying that other sisters should avoid wearing black, you know, it's completely up to you. But personally, I have felt that even color makes a big difference in the West, you know. And the idea of black, I believe, is very much a Gulf thing, you know. Probably we especially in the 90s and stuff, when all the hijabs were being like started being exported, I think we were more likely to wear black because that's the color that was available. You know? Literally all over Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, black is beautiful. Black is it's sleek. It's seen as for women, and it's seen as very elegant, right? Like the hijabs and the niqabs, but that's how it's seen in that culture. But in the West, you know, in some ways, I would say I do adjust things like the color, you know. Simply because I don't believe color is haram, you know, as long as it's not like shocking pink or anything. And it just, you know, just to take local culture into consideration a little bit is not a bad thing, you know.
I think just on that note, I would like to you know, just add something here. Like, I do live in the north. I live in Newcastle.
Okay.
And I find that being black as well, like when I first moved here, you know, I'm a Londoner, right? So people used to say to me, "Why are you moving to Newcastle? Like, these Northerners are so racist." But sometimes we do have perceptions of people, or we judge people.
Newcastle isn't. But Newcastle isn't rural, is it? It's not like a village.
Well, you know, when I first moved to Newcastle, I could literally count the amount of non-white people on one hand. Okay, in the city centre. Okay. That's in the city centre, yeah. So that's like 18, 19 years ago now. So it's completely different now. So it's changed a lot since I've lived here, and there are a lot of rural areas because Newcastle's quite a small town. So like you don't have to drive very far, and you're in the countryside. You with lots of fields, there's sheep, there's cows. So I've been to places where if you drive up the coastal areas where they've got castles and things like that, I've been up those areas, and you'll come across villages, where these people maybe they've never met somebody who isn't white before, and I find, mashallah, that these people, they're just very well mannered. So even if they see me, they might look twice, but they're not rude or anything like that. So I think it depends. Like it's just as you said, you have to kind of weigh up things. There are particular areas in Newcastle, for example, where there's it's known that they've got like the EDL, for example. Okay, there's particular housing areas where they have like estates where it's known that people are part of the EDL. So we avoid things like that. Or even sometimes they might have a march in the town and this kind of thing. So those days you'll avoid going to the town, for example, and there's like surrounding areas like in Sunderland as well. There's certain places where they're known for certain things like maybe racial prejudice and this kind of thing. So you just have to be wise and avoid certain things. But I think in general, my experience at least, meeting people who live in small villages and very rural areas, usually they're just very polite, I find. And respectable,
that's great.
Approach them and talk to them. They're not that you can see that is something different for them, but I think it's just that they're so well mannered, and I think that's part of the beauty of English culture that has been lost with many people. That's my opinion. Like a lot of people haven't being brought up in this country myself. I think a lot of people are losing certain kind of English values. They talk about British values, but people are losing some certain values that they had with being polite and respectful, even to people that you don't know, even if you don't agree with what they're doing or you don't like certain things. It's not your place to just, be rude and, make rude comments or something like that. You just show politeness and respect. And I find that in these rural areas, people still have those values. So it's usually a lot easier to kind of get on and do what you want. And usually there's not even many people anyways. You'll see hardly anybody when you go around these places.
I think you're right. I mean, I think it takes somebody confident to break the ice, doesn't it? And
basically
to change people's perceptions. And I think one of the ideas that really helped me, I think, even just wearing hijab, even just being a very visible Muslim, is we think that people are constantly looking at us, judging us, but actually the average person is as afraid of you as you are of them, in the sense that all human beings are self-conscious. It doesn't matter how normal they look or how much they fit in. Every human being is literally walking around wondering what other people think of them. And once you kind of realize that actually this sense of self-consciousness is just a human condition, then you realize that actually I have as much right to be the way I am as this other person who might be from not a minority community, but still it's a human being. They also have questions, and they also have I would say insecurities, right? So, but the way we're dressed, we're doing it for a higher cause. We're doing it for the sake of Allah. We're obeying our Creator. So I think once you keep that in mind, and you get over the kind of, I would say, self-consciousness, I think it does become easier, and you become braver, and you realize that actually people aren't as, like you said, especially in Britain, you're right. But one of the things I love about Britain is people are polite. People,
Yes.
they don't actually like confronting you. And actually, you know, the situation that I mentioned about the co-working space.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, the person who came to approach me and the founders of this this co-working space, who both had a bit of an issue and wanted to talk to me about secularism, etc. They're not British, right?
Yeah.
So I actually believe that it's because they're not British that they had that issue. You know?
Yeah, because I think people get paranoid almost. Well, they kind of try to
a British person, definitely, a British person would never have come over and talked to me about the way I'm dressed.
Yeah.
It just would not happen, you know, especially in London. And, you know, I think, in fact, a British person would be mortified at the thought of it, at the thought of making another person feel uncomfortable, who's not doing any harm, is literally just, you know, wearing certain clothing. So that's why I think also that the whole niqab debate, whenever it kind of comes up in Europe, I still think that Britain is the country that is least likely to ever have a niqab ban, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not British.
Yeah,
It's literally just not British to go around dictating how people dress. So I think there are some opportunist type politicians who might use it as like, you know, oh yeah, like a popular thing to just, I don't know, you know, to just kind of stoke certain emotions in certain parts of the public. But overall, I don't think, inshallah, in Britain, I don't think it's very British to kind of impose types of clothing, codes of clothing onto people. And I think British people are quite comfortable overall with diversity.
Yeah, subhanallah.
And now with COVID, I mean, you know, nobody can say anything about a face veil now, I think.
Basically. But apparently in
sure,
France, they've still got the ban on the face veil, but you have to wear a mask. So it's just like,
yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean?
France is, you know, France. Yeah, I have friends who grew up in France, and they said to me, Muslim friends, and they said, and now they live in Britain, and they said it was only when they came to Britain that they realized how mentally restricted they were in France. You know, because like my friend, she said that literally you grow up feeling like you can't really express yourself as a Muslim.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to. Whereas she said in Britain, it's like, wow, you guys are like so confident. You're so like, and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, where does that come from? And you know, I literally think that we were brought up, encouraged to be ourselves by our British schools and our British teachers.
Yeah.
Because like all my teachers most of my teachers were white, and especially in primary school, and I literally remember them encouraging us to embrace our culture, to, you know, like, so they used to even have clubs where we could speak our language,
Really?
all the time. And yeah, because one of the teachers was interested in learning Urdu. He was like, I'm going to start an Urdu club after school. And he got those of us who knew Urdu to kind of come along and help out. And so like I was wearing hijab from primary school, and it was always like celebrated as a positive thing, wasn't? And I believe that that's a very British value, telling people to be themselves, and telling. So you know, sometimes when somebody says to you, you know, what, you're British, why do you wear niqab or something like this? I would say I think being British made me feel comfortable enough to embrace my religion, you know, like I felt like I am supposed to do what I believe as a British person. I've always been encouraged to do that. And so it's actually I would say a really positive thing about Britain, that I guess that those of us who grew up in this country as Muslims, we were always encouraged to embrace ourselves, our culture, and not to kind of suppress it. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Definitely, I think I would personally agree. I think definitely there's, as you grow up in this country, I've experienced some racism, but never in a sense where I'm trying to make to feel where I shouldn't be who I am. Do you know what I mean? So I can definitely.
Yeah, it's usually some odd idiocies here and there, and maybe experiences where you're made to feel uncomfortable by particularly ignorant people. But
yeah.
Overall, in terms of, I don't know, at least for me, for my experience has been, whenever I've interacted with policemen, for example, once I reported somebody for shouting some racist kind of abuse, or Islamophobic abuse, and that this was just just a random person, and I was not wearing niqab that day either.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean, that it's really not about niqab. I think it's just about difference, just being different and being a Muslim, being visibly Muslim. I think when I've reported anything like that, or once at an airport, I was having a nosebleed actually. Suddenly I had a nosebleed when I came off the plane. And there were some policemen nearby, and they helped me out. And so, in terms of any kind of interaction I've ever had with official people, if you like, whether it's teachers or policemen or hospital, any kind of situations like that, I've always felt completely accepted, and really, people have been really, really helpful, and not discriminatory. At the same time, I don't want us to. I think sometimes, when we talk about hijab, we can paint a picture of too much Islamophobia on the streets and stuff like that. But I am cognizant of the fact that, when I was growing up, my mom, she was literally the only hijabi that we knew, right?
All right.
This is in the 80s, and in the 80s. And it's actually because she used to wear hijab, other women started wearing hijab in our area. And she would literally get somebody saying something racist every time we went out. A white person usually would always say something, but that was more being Asians, I guess. They would say something about being a Paki or whatever, But what I'm trying to say is that level of kind of constant and direct abuse is not there anymore. Might be in other ways, but I think our generation do have to be grateful to the generation before who did start wearing the hijab and did normalize it.
Basically, yeah.
And we have to realize that actually we've got it a lot easier in many ways. Because if it wasn't for them normalizing it, it would still be strange. But now, at least in many parts of the UK and in the cities, it's not seen as strange at all.
Yeah. So on that note, do you feel, obviously, as somebody who doesn't wear the niqab full time, do you feel that there's a difference in how niqabis get treated to sisters who just wear the hijab, for example, like in the Muslim community or otherwise?
I think that's a difficult question, because I think I don't really want to speak for all niqabis, I don't want to because I don't know what experiences other sisters have had,
Well, just in your own experience.
But I do think personality has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because if you are somebody who wears niqab and you are a very private person, then maybe you won't have had that many positive experiences, right? But if you're a very confident person and you're the sort of person who would initiate conversation and stuff like that, then you've probably had a completely different experience of life, you know, in the UK as a niqabi. Simply because people tend to respond to you the way you present, right?
Yes.
So my friends who are niqabis, who are more kind of, I would say, outgoing, I've noticed they have more positive things to say, you know, than sisters who are quite private and, you know, they've been on the receiving end of racial abuse or you know, Islamophobic abuse, but they're not really very proactive in their, and I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying that it's just their personality, their style of being. They're not the sort of proactive people who would go out and strike up friendships, or, you know, they just maybe quietly taking their children to the park, or, you know, that sort of thing, and keeping themselves to themselves, and then they might experience negative things. So I really think it's about, I think when you talk to a niqabi and she's got nothing but negative things to say about her experiences in the UK, usually when you dig a bit, you can see that, okay, you know, it's not as simple as, oh, this is a racist country. It's not as simple as
definitely
that.
not. Yeah.
It's more, I think we have to also be introspective as to, like, and I do think we do have a responsibility. And I know that people don't, I don't know why people don't like that. They're like, it's like, well, why should I be the one, you know? Well, because you're doing something that's against the norm.
Basically.
You know, like, if you're doing something against the norm, yeah, you have to explain it a little bit. You know, you have to go out of your way a bit. You know, it's not, the whole world is not there to just bow down to you. You know? It's just like if I was doing something weird in my garden, you know, and my neighbor would be like, I would be like, well, you know, just explain it. You know, I would just explain it. I would just, because human beings like to be in the know. They like to sort of, you know, and especially British people are so, like, worried about offending you. You know, they'll be kind of reticent to start a conversation about the elephant in the room, or the, you know, the thing that they're thinking about, you know. So sometimes you have to be the one who does that. I know that's difficult if you're, like, say, an introvert and you know, and you've chosen maybe, or your personality is such that you don't want to reach out, but in a way, you know, the way you're experiencing life is not just about the external world. It's about the way you choose to interact with the external world as well. So I think, like, when I speak to somebody and they know that I wear niqab, or they think I wear niqab, and I act as though it's not a barrier to anything, to any work that I'm doing or whatever, or my effectiveness, right, in any given thing, then that person accepts that as well. Usually, you know. But if you act as though it is a barrier, and you do think of it as a barrier and something that's stopping you, then obviously that's going to affect the way people take it and respond to it.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely can agree with what you said as well, just from experiences that I've had with other niqabi sisters as well. I think that makes a lot of sense, definitely. So, sister, have you in your, you know, time as, you know, living in the UK and being abroad and stuff like that, have you come across sisters who've been forced into wearing the niqab at all?
Not anyone that's admitted it.
Right.
I would say I haven't met anyone who's been forced,
Mm-hmm.
but I know lots of sisters who do it because their husbands would like them to do it,
Right.
you know, or their husbands have asked them to.
Yeah.
But I haven't experienced from them a rejection of that, you know. They kind of, as I said, as a Muslim woman, you submit to Allah and you choose to obey Allah, and within that choice means that you're choosing to obey Allah's rules and laws, and one of those is obedience to one's husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the sisters who they've done that consciously, you know,
Yeah.
they've chosen to, and we as Muslim women, we choose to accept that we have the head of the house, right?
Yeah,
you know, the final say, the Amir. And so then after that, if a sister accepts, you know, if her husband would really like her to do something and she goes along with it or accepts it, then that's a blessing. That's something she'll be rewarded for.
Mm.
And so mostly I've met sisters like that.
And what about sisters who are not allowed to wear it because of their husbands? Or because of their parents?
You know, my mum used to wear niqab when she first came to this country.
Mm.
She grew up in an area of India where niqab was normal, like burqa, they call it burqa, right?
Yeah.
But my dad told her to stop wearing the niqab.
Mm.
And that was interesting when my mum told me that. And I asked her, like, what, you know, she said, because, she said we would be on the train and, like, nobody wears hijab or niqab, right?
Yeah.
And she said, my dad, this is interesting reasoning, right? She said, my dad said to her, it's better if I can sit here and look at your face, yeah, than look around and there's all these women everywhere, you know?
MashaAllah. Wow.
I thought that was quite interesting, actually,
MashaAllah.
because I never really thought of it like that.
Mm.
You know, like, he's a newlywed, basically, at that point. And as a man, he's thinking, you know what? There's like all these naked, or half stuff, like, not naked, but, you know,
Yeah.
women who are showing their beauty all around me. And my wife is sitting here all in black. And, like, you know, it's better if I could just look at her and that would be my focus, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that I thought that was quite interesting. And yeah, she stopped wearing the niqab at that point.
Mm.
So that's one example I have, I guess. But apart from that, again, maybe people just haven't told me about their situations, but I don't really know of sisters whose husbands are that kind of, you know, authoritative in that sense. I would say authoritarian, I mean. Rather, it's usually a negotiation between the two.
Yeah.
And a discussion, you know. So he might say, look, be careful, if you're in this area, then don't wear it, or, you know, for her safety. But yeah, that's the kind of situations I've come across personally.
Alhamdulillah. So what would you advise a sister who would like to start wearing the niqab but she's kind of afraid to wear it, or she doesn't feel confident to wear it?
Okay, I would say there must be a reason that she feels, you know, she's thinking about it. And it's worth thinking about that, you know, like, and again, like, I think we need to take the sort of overly emotional and overly kind of prescriptive thing out of the issue of niqab.
Yeah.
And instead embrace it as a good deed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't, if you believe it's obligatory, then that's a different matter. Then you should wear niqab, right? If you are convinced that it's obligatory. But if you're not, then we should all, and that's what I would say, at least all of the schools of thought at least agree that it's a good thing.
Yes.
If not obligatory. So I think all of us as Muslim women, instead of thinking of it as a separate category of hijab almost, yeah, I think we should all embrace it as part of our Islamic dress.
Yes.
Just as we embrace any good deed, and we should think of it as, you know, something that we all do at times. But for sisters who are considering doing it like full time when they go out, etc., I would say if you believe it's obligatory and you're convinced of that, then you should do it.
Yes.
You know, unless any harm is going to come to you, any direct harm. But if you don't and you'd like to do it as a good deed, then, you know, like I said, what's stopping you? You know, is there a reason that you're not doing it? I would say if it's a good deed and you're doing it, you want to do it, and you believe that it will be pleasing to Allah, then do it. You know, just start.
Alhamdulillah.
And again, don't think of it as, I think what happens is people put so much pressure on themselves, like either I'm a niqabi or I'm not, you know, type thing. And that stops them from ever doing it. You know, or it makes the decision much bigger.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think just embrace it as a good thing to do, and I think it's fine. You know, I think we should normalize it in the Muslim community.
Alhamdulillah. I think that's really what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because I think in the Muslim community, because there's so much there's a bit of stigma around niqab now, but it is basically hijab, like you're saying. The niqab is part of the hijab, so, you know, whether you see it's obligatory or not, if every Muslim woman would just embrace it as being a form of hijab, then it makes
part of her Islamic dress, you know, her wardrobe. And also just knowing that even if you don't consider it obligatory, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ did used to cover their faces. It's not just a cultural thing, you know, as some people keep saying. It is an Islamic thing. It's in all of the books of fiqh, covering the face. Aisha radiallahu anha used to cover her face. There's hadiths in Bukhari in which she, you know, it's clear that she did, and she talks about it. So at least the mothers of the believers did it, and if not more than them. And it's a symbol of, you know, modesty, virtue, obedience to Allah. So I think if we embrace it as that and we normalize it, the thing that I'm worried about is that because sisters think that either you're a niqabi or you're not, even when they're literally caked in makeup, right, they will go out without niqab because they think, well, I'm not a niqabi.
Yeah.
Right? But who created this category of niqabi? And you don't need to. Who said you have to be a category? No. You're a Muslim woman. You're supposed to observe the right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has only allowed you to go out of your house and to appear in front of men or in public if you have your aura and a certain decorum and a certain amount of yourself covered in a certain way. If you look at it like that, then you think, okay, you know, I need to forget about categories. I need to think what would be pleasing to Allah, you know. If I'm wearing red lipstick, I'm accentuating my lips. I'm making them more beautified to men, in front of men, and it's not right for me to go out like that, you know. So I must cover my face in that situation, and I should not wear makeup, and I should get to that place wherever I'm going, the party, whatever, or gathering, and then I can wear it there. I think this idea that sisters are caked in makeup and they think it's completely fine, you know, to kind of literally be drawing a lot of attention to themselves and hijab. I think that is actually needs to change.
Yes.
That needs to change, because that's causing us to sin, you know, when we do that. And also it confuses people. Like once I met this lady, non-Muslim lady, and she said, and she came to a talk where we were talking about hijab, and she said, oh, I didn't realize that it was, like that, because she said, I've got colleagues who wear makeup and hijab, so I thought maybe it's just like a cultural headdress. Right? You see, like we give a very confusing message when you're basically trying to look sexy, basically, right? And you've got hijab on. It's like cognitive dissonance. You look at it and think, oh, what's going on there? Like, is that person trying to be modest, or are they trying to be attractive? And I think as Muslim women, we need to stop tricking ourselves and falling into Shaitan's trap, which is he wants us to trick ourselves and think, oh, I am a Muslim woman, I'm religious, but I can also I just want to be attractive, in public. And we have to start becoming, I think, sensitive to Shaitan's whispers, because I think people are justifying these things in all sorts of weird ways nowadays, And also, I think shuyukh are sometimes scared to talk about it because it's become so, unpolitically correct.
Basically, yeah. Especially that.
Yeah. Back in the day, the shuyukh were always talking about hijab, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, let's not touch that topic because we don't want to be seen as coercive men or something, like. And there's this narrative that men can't talk about women's things, right? Which is completely wrong. If there's a scholar, if the Prophet ﷺ was here, would we say to him, you can't speak to us, you can't address us? Of course not. So this kind of narrative of men can't speak about women's issues is wrong. Allah is going to actually ask the men, did they look after the women? Did they teach the women? Were they responsible in their communities? Just as we will be asked about our families and our communities. All of us are shepherds, right? And responsible for our flocks, as the hadith goes. So men do have a say. Men are supposed to be, men and women, if they're qualified, they're teachers. They can teach one another, and they can, in the sense that we should be enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, regardless of whether we're male or female. So I think we as women need to stop falling into that trap as well, where basically Western feminism has kind of encouraged us to adopt, that idea that men don't have a say. It's not true at all. Allah has given certain people knowledge, certain people authority. He told us to go to the scholars, and many scholars are men. So it's got nothing to do with
the gender,
the sex. Yeah, exactly. So I think we need to start being more sincere as Muslim women. Remember what the purpose of our life is to obey Allah, is not to be accepted by society. Allah tells us that if we make Him number one in our life, then He will cause the world and the people of the world to love us as well. He will establish love for us on the earth. And I think we need to be women of substance, be strong, because if it wasn't for the past generation being strong, we wouldn't have mosques in this country. We wouldn't have hijab, wouldn't have been normalized. So our generation also needs to be strong and not allow hijab and our Islamic practices to be watered down just because of some perceived consideration that we have or fear that we have. Instead, we should be leading society, and to do that, you need to be a role model and lead the way, and then society will follow. Society will follow, because I don't know if you've noticed with the whole Me Too movement, and I think in the West there is like this big kind of an awakening that's happening, that we've been doing it wrong all these years, right? Like we haven't got it figured out in the West when it comes to men and women.
Definitely not.
And their interactions, and especially at work, and I think there is an awakening there, right? Some offices and places of work are introducing rules that Islam has established 1400 years ago, right?
Wow.
You know, things like not being alone in a room with, you know, without a chaperone, or not closing the door. Even handshaking, you know, not all women really want to shake hands. They don't want to have physical contact with people anymore. You know, they don't want it to be normal that a man.
Corona stopped that as well, hasn't it?
Sorry?
Corona stopped the handshaking as well.
Yeah, yeah, it did. It really did. But you know, like the whole thing of like men at work thinking they can kiss a woman on her cheek, right? Like a lot of women don't feel comfortable with that. A lot of women are saying, you know, actually we don't want to wear heels. You know, heels hurt, and we don't want to wear them to work every day. So I think there is a bit of an awakening happening, a slow awakening, and it's for us as Muslim women to posit the alternative to women, you know, in this time. And instead of being insular, instead of thinking of becoming very protectionist, I would say, like just thinking about, okay, I'm just going to keep my religion to myself. Instead, we should be sharing. We should be reaching out and realizing that, you know, when Allah said in the Quran, you are the best nation to be extracted for the sake of mankind, He said that to the women as well, right? Not just to the men. And He said, why? Because you enjoin the good and you forbid the evil and you believe in Allah. So we have, Islam is a gift Allah gave us, and we've got to look at it as a gift, not as it's not just merely an identity or merely a religion, you know, or label that we put on ourselves. It's the way of life that He gave us to share with mankind, with human beings. And as women, I think we need to start stepping up, not being apologetic about the deen, but showing people, actually, you know what, this will solve your problems. This will bring womankind peace of mind.
Alhamdulillah.
And I don't think we're doing that enough, you know.
MashaAllah. So, sister, just to end this interview, alhamdulillah, it's been amazing, but I'm going to ask you one last question, which you probably answered already, but I want to ask you this. What does the niqab mean to you in just 3 words? What would you say?
3 words. 3 words.
Yeah.
I can say act of worship, you know,
Alhamdulillah.
an act of worship.
Alhamdulillah.
Pleasing to Allah.
Alhamdulillah. You know, I'm so glad I've been able to talk to you about this, because Masha, I think you said so many things that are really points that we can really reflect on. And alhamdulillah, I knew you had a lot to say about this kind of stuff, because as I said, when I saw those little clips on TV with you, I knew that it had been edited and, you know, you haven't been able to like really put your point across. But I think, mashallah, you've really done it today. So alhamdulillah, I feel satisfied that I've got like a lot of answers from you and a lot of different perspectives, a totally different perspective actually, and quite a few things. So yeah, I find it really beneficial. Inshallah, the other sisters and other listeners will benefit as well. Inshallah.
Well, Jazakallah khair for giving me the opportunity, because, you know, like you said, most of the time it's like you're called on to talk about niqab for a minute and you have to like do sound bites, you know, which is really. Well, it was nice speaking to you. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.